Hi and welcome to the Philosopher's Games. After talking far too much about the press conferences of E3 2017, I thought why not looking at some games that probably got overlooked a bit. I would call them hidden gems, even though some of them aren't. And for some reason I like the idea of making it a top list. The order is decided by personal preference, but it is not that important, to be honest. Let's start with number 10, Valfaris. You remember Slain? This game was heavily criticized when it came out. It was not good, but the developer of it looked at all the criticism, worked hard and re-released it as Slain Back from Hell and brought this huge update to the game. After that it was suddenly much better, actually good. So the new game of this developer, Steel Mantis, is called Valfaris and is an action platformer. It looks again very heavy metal and dark, with a very nice art style, great music, at least if you're into metal, and if he has learned his lesson, it could also play well. So I'm interested in how Steel Mantis' new game turns out this time. Number 9. The makers of Until Dawn Supermassive Games are working on some VR titles and on a game called Hidden Agenda. Not sure how good this will be or how well it will work, but it is at least an interesting concept. It's an action-adventure focused on a non-linear narrative, comparable to Until Dawn itself. You have to make decisions, but this time you can play this with multiple players, and all players can vote via their smartphones for a decision. And I know by now many will say no to the game, but let me explain one more detail. One player will at some point receive a secret objective, a so to say hidden agenda, and with this the game designers plan to create conflict and intrigues between the players. If they implement this well, it could maybe become something like the Werewolves of Miller's Hollow game, just a bit different. So in theory it sounds cool, but of course how it turns out is a totally different story. Number 8, Blasphemous. As a Souls fan, I have to mention it here. It's a dark fantasy action platformer with combat. Some would say it's a 2D Dark Souls, but I would compare it with another game that was most likely also an inspiration for Dark Souls itself, Castlevania. Blasphemous' art style seems to be really strong and is very dark, almost horrific. It's by The Game Kitchen, who also released The Last Door, which is a little 8-bit horror adventure with a great soundtrack. It was received quite positive, even though not many know it. So those guys had a successful Kickstarter for Blasphemous and released a trailer, art style and music caught my eyes and ears, and so I decided to put it on the list. Let's hope it plays well too. Number 7. Another game that you probably have heard about but was a bit overshadowed is the JRPG Ni no Kuni 2 Revenant Kingdom, developed by Level 5 and published by Bandai Namco. It will release only for PlayStation 4 and, as far as I know, for PC at the 10th of November 2017. Unlike the previous game, Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch, Studio Ghibli will not contribute the animated sequences for the sequel. Still, the art style will remember you of this corporation of the predecessor. It still looks great and like something you rarely see in games in terms of art. Wrath of the White Witch was well received, and if they can improve even further on it, this could become a very strong release. Just look at it. If you like Ghibli anime, this will at least catch your eye. Number 6. This game is also not that unknown. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice by Ninja Theory, the guys who made DMC Devil May Cry, is an action-adventure with some interesting ideas behind it. They make this project as an independent developer, so they publish it themselves and want to make it a shorter game but sell it cheaper. They claim it is half as big as a AAA title, but it will only cost half as much. The main character, Senua, suffers from mental illness after a Viking invasion and has to live through a psychotic manifestation of her mind and perception of reality. This seems to be reflected through Celtic and Nordic mythology. I think it's an interesting topic, and the developers consulted experts and people who suffer under comparable conditions, so they are approaching this respectfully and maybe want to raise awareness. In addition, it's also an unusual setting and the shown footage looks very good. art style, animation, which uses motion capture, and graphics are really impressive. We haven't seen much of the combat and other game mechanics yet, but knowing Ninja Theory, I would be surprised if they do not deliver. How long the game will be in the end, I don't know, but it will be released at the 8th of August 2017, so quite soon. Number 5. Sundered is a Metroidvania game with a unique art style, combat bosses and strange-looking enemies. Some would say it's like Dark Souls. I'm a simple man. Sundered is a new game by Thunder Lotus Games, who also made Jotun, which was well received. This time it is not Norse mythology, but a more horrifying, mystic world with strange creatures in it. If it plays well, this could end up being a very good game. The art style and world design look really unique. It is not as dark as Blasphemous and more colorful, but still generates this sinister atmosphere. I really like the combination of color and somewhat horrifying elements. It also looks like the game has a dodge ability with iframes, which I like too. Number 4. Absolver is an online role-playing fighting game with a very interesting fighting system. It will have PvE but also PvP content. It's basically a game about martial arts, unarmed and with melee weapons, and gives you the ability to learn moves from your opponents and to customize the fighting style of your character to your desire, which is a really cool idea. You can imagine this as switching out moves from your move list, which will allow new combos if I understood that correctly. There will be also equipment and stats. With all this, it looks like it has a lot of mechanical depth in it. It's developed by Slowclap and published by Devolver Digital. Since Devolver has a good track record with their published games, I'm confident that this game could end up being very interesting and having the needed quality. The art style is special but looks clean, so you always see what's going on your screen. The move seems to have weight and impact. It will release at the 29th of August 2017 for PC and PlayStation 4. Number 3. A game you have probably heard of one or the other way is Call of Cthulhu, the official video game made by the French developer Cyanide, who you might know from Styx, Shards of Darkness. They work together with Focus Home Interactive as a publisher, who for example brought you The Surge, and is also publishing Vampire by Don't Not Entertainment. What we see in the trailer are all typical and needed Lovecraftian elements. Dark places, cults, ancient horrific entities, and slowly losing insanity until it becomes hard to differentiate between reality and imagination for the characters. I wouldn't call myself a huge Cthulhu fan, but I always found that setting and universe interesting and played some related games. Even Bloodborne is heavily inspired by Lovecraft's ideas and works. Maybe let's have a short look at the origin. The Call of Cthulhu is a short story by H.P. Lovecraft, published 1928 in the pulp magazine Weird Tales, where a lot of his writings were published too. Those magazines back in the day were printed on cheap wood pulp paper, and they published those sometimes strange, cheap fictional stories in them. The term pulp fiction is based on this. Many great things were published in those magazines, like Tarzan of the Apes or the stories of Lovecraft. Lovecraft was one of the most influential writers for the horror genre, but died with only 46 in poverty because nobody knew him back in the day. His work should later influence many writers, like Stephen King, so tragically he never witnessed his success during his lifetime. But you still see his influence to this day, because his Cthulhu mythos and his style lives on. In horror literature, movies, the tabletop RPG Call of Cthulhu, or in some video games. With all that said, Call of Cthulhu, the official video game, is based on the tabletop RPG from 1981 with the same name. As typical for those games, this will focus on investigating strange events and experiencing the madness. I think the trailer sold this quite well and I'm interested in the game. If it's done well, we could end up getting a new good Cthulhu game. I remember, even though it's not in the Cthulhu universe, Eternal Darkness, which had its problems, but was for me a very memorable game, and it's heavily inspired by Lovecraft. Number 2. Elix is a third-person open-world RPG by the small German studio Piranha Bytes, who also made the Gothic and Risen series, and it is published by THQ Nordic. I already mentioned Elix in my top interesting games of 2017 video. As someone who liked the first two Gothic and Risen games, I'm interested to see if Piranha Bytes' new game will be any good. I have to say, hearing some interviews and looking at some footage increased my interest even further. Of course, animation work looks a bit clunky, but that's to be expected, and I just hope that world building, combat and especially cheesy dialogues and characters are again on point. I can play it in German, so I definitely have an advantage, because the developer is from a region in Germany that is known for their rough mentality and language, so to say, which definitely influenced the humor of the previous games. In this region's dialect and slang, things are not always grammatically correct, and they often say what they think plain in your face. This is also reflected in the humor of the region, resulting in a lot of banter, but has a certain charm to it. Coming from that region too, I love some of the dialogues in Piranha Bytes' other games, but of course this charm is most likely lost in translation. Anyway, I hope they nail it as in Gothic 1 or 2 again. Number 1. Hunt Showdown by Crytek. If you don't like spiders, maybe skip this title, so spider warning. When I first saw the trailer, I could not imagine what this game really is, but at E3 they showed gameplay footage and I have to say this looks really interesting. This game is a bit difficult to explain. It's an online PvPvE game with matchmaking, where you are a monster bounty hunter and can team up with a friend or another player on 1 square kilometer big and open maps. There are also other players that basically play against you. Every player is a monster bounty hunter and they have to kill special AI boss monsters that are randomly placed on the map and banish them. Banishing takes about 60 to 90 seconds, and then you have the possibility to get your bounty in the form of money and XP to improve your character. You secure the bounty if you can escape by reaching a randomly placed extraction point. But here's the problem. During this banishing process, all other players can see your exact location and they will most likely try to kill you and steal your bounty. So the hunter becomes the hunted. But there's another twist to it. The game has a permadeath mechanic, so if you die, your character is gone, but your progress is somewhat saved through a bloodline system, so you keep money and XP to some degree, I guess. How exactly this will work out in the final game, I don't know. It has no release date yet and will be most likely far over a year away from release, but I have to say that sounds interesting. And these are my hidden gems of and around E3 2017. I also have 2 honorable mentions. First, A Plague Tale: Innocence. Little red warning. This is an action-adventure and its story is about a massive rat plague with lots of rats that start killing everything. It looks quite tense. And second, Pyre, the new game by Supergiant Games, the creators of Bastion and Transistor. It comes out at the 25th of July 2017. I have a lot more games on my list that I would consider hidden gems, but I wanted to give you a good mix, and in some of them I'm not that interested. But of course, if enough people ask nicely in the comments, I would think about an additional video, but you can see the list in the background. Most of those games are indie and 2D pixel art games, so maybe you already had enough of them. Also note that I have another top list video with games I'm very interested in this year and none of them have released yet. Also, except for Elix, I avoided those titles in this video here, so the first half of the other top list video is maybe worth a look. At least if you like indie games. Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord is in it too. Do you have any hidden gems or recommendations? What games surprised you this year at E3? Feel free to write it down in the comments. I'm sure I missed some potential interesting games. I hope you found this list useful. If you liked it, consider the YouTube and Twitter things. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye.